Hello, I'm Mary Taylor. I'm president of Pro-Life Utah, and I have Gayle Ruzicka, president of the Utah Eagle Forum, here with me today. Many of you know that Pro-Life Utah and the Eagle Forum have worked hand in hand for almost 10 years now, Gayle, almost 10 years now.
Wow.
And I will say that, Gayle has been my mentor. Gayle is my hero. Gayle has worked for the unborn, rights of the unborn, since long before I got involved, decades before I got involved, back at times when it was probably a pretty lonely job, huh, Gail?
Yeah, there was a time.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
anymore. There's just so many good people who are working really
Well,
hard to do anything they can to protect the unborn.
right. So, in addition to everything else you do, you were an RNC platform delegate, correct?
That's right.
So, tell us what happened. I know in 2016, the Republican Party had a wonderful platform that really stood up for the rights of the unborn. And I'm not quite sure I understand what happened. Can you tell us where we're at with a Republican platform now?
Well, I'm not sure I really understand what happened, except I was there. And I was there. I was there in 2016. I was on the platform committee. That convention, that was 8 years ago, and we haven't had one since. And then we passed this wonderful pro-life platform. Phyllis Schlafly met with Donald Trump, and he wanted her endorsement. She went over the platform with him, and he agreed. And he promised her that he would protect that platform and that he would support it. And that's what he did. He did exactly what he told her he would do. She endorsed him, and that's what happened. Well, that was 8 years ago. Now here we are 8 years later, and on the platform committee again. I expected it to be exactly the way it's been in the past. The platform committee meets the week before the actual convention. It's usually a 2-day event. A 1 day, sometimes even longer, but 1 day is breakout committees, and for different categories, the pro-life family issues being one of the breakout categories, but there's education, a lot of other things. And then the next day, after you've been in the breakout committees, going over the platform, deciding if there needs to be amendments, changes in any way, the next day the full committee meets and once again reviews it and gets reports from those breakout committees, those subcommittees. And so when we start the night before, Sunday night, with just getting a copy of the platform, getting instructions. So that this time we met the night before. They didn't give us a copy of the platform. They said, we'll give it to you tomorrow. But they did introduce, they had the 6 people stand up, the 6 chairmen, and they introduced them to us of the breakout committees, because there were 6 breakout committees. So they said, come back tomorrow morning. We'll give you your assignment for the breakout committee, which is always unusual because you need the platform the night before so you can study and read it, and especially the section that whatever breakout committee you're on. They just said, wait, we'll do it tomorrow. So the next day we met and got there waiting to have them dismiss us from me as a group, and then they dismiss you to go your various directions. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. We had speakers. President Trump called in and welcomed us all and thanked us for being there and talked about the importance of the platform. And we waited and we waited, and it never happened. We never had breakout committees. The other thing they did is they took our telephone and our watch, because if you have if your watch is an Apple Watch, and we had these little packets, we had to put them in and lock them in. And then they wouldn't. So I had my computer. Then they made a motion to vote that we wouldn't be allowed to use computers or any kinds of iPads or those kinds of things. And so then we waited for that breakout, but it never happened. And the next thing we knew, after we'd heard from several speakers, and the speakers were speakers who talked about the various sections of the platform. It was kind of interesting though, because they'd passed out the platform during roll call. So it took a while. They call your name and then you go up and you say you're here, and then you get your copy of the platform. I was glancing through it. I wasn't studying it because I was listening to the speakers who were also talking about the platform. And then when the speakers finished, they made it, talked a little bit. Marsha Blackburn was the chairman. So she was conducting the meeting. She said a few things. And the next thing I know, they are moving toward making a motion to pass the platform just the way it is, with no changes, no amendments. Never happened before. I've been on the platform committee several times, and even when I haven't been on the platform committee, I have helped. We've worked with Phyllis Schlafly, who's always been involved with that platform committee, and I've helped her. I've been going to the conventions since 1992. Never seen anything like this. So when people immediately started getting up and trying to get to the microphone, they took a few people that were in agreement with them. And as I was walking up to get to try to make an amendment to, I mean, there's nothing, not one word about the unborn in this platform, not one word. They have a section that they call about life, but there doesn't mention the unborn baby. So I was headed there to make a motion for an amendment to add language about the unborn baby, that the unborn child has a fundamental right to life that cannot be infringed. That was my amendment. We were told they were not taking any amendments. If you have an amendment you want, put it in writing and hand it in. But they were working towards passing them. There was no time. I mean, there was a motion on the floor. A couple of other people got there to try to do things. They were either called out of order, or if they were making the right motion, they'd listen to them. But no changes, zero changes. So before we even knew what had happened, it came up for a vote. There was only a few of us that voted no. There were like 85. There's 112 delegates. And I'm not positive that every single delegate was there yet, but close, because there was like 85 yes votes to 18 no votes. So I guess that would be just about everybody. And that was it. It was just, we couldn't stop it. We couldn't say anything. I was so astounded. I was telling people around me, vote no. We haven't even read the platform yet. They just gave it to us this morning, and then they had speakers. Anybody that listened to the speakers wasn't studying, because you have to study it. You can't just read it. You have to study it. It was shortened. It was much shorter than usual. I didn't care about that part. I don't care if it's shorter, as long as it says the right things. But there was no pro-life language, and then they voted, and it passed. And they said, "Thank you for being here," and sign and die. I had several reporters say, "Well, how long did all that last?" I said, "I don't know. They had my watch, but I do know that before noon we were out of there." But I could, they had my phone, they had my watch. There was no clock in the room. We just watched this time just passing us by quickly, and it was over. But it was before 12 o'clock. I would guess around 11:30, quarter to 12 is when they took the final vote, or when they said the final sign and die. Said, "Gee, thanks a lot. You guys are wonderful. Thanks for coming." And it was gone. We was over. There was nothing we could do. I tried everything I could possibly do. I got to everybody I could talk to, people in charge, saying, "What can be done? How can we fix this?" It doesn't mention the unborn. We have to mention the unborn. Now, what does it mention? It mentions things like, that it talks about, "We proudly stand for families and life." But it doesn't say about the unborn. It says, "We believe in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States that guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process." So even if that included the unborn, and it should, I'm the first one to say that the 14th Amendment should include the unborn, but it never has.
Right.
If it did include, Roe versus Wade would have never gone into effect. So since Roe versus Wade, the 14th Amendment has not saved one baby, not one, because you have to include it. And that's why our platform has always called for a constitutional amendment that would support the life of the unborn, giving the unborn the constitutional right to life. But that's not in there. And they didn't mention that. That was in our other platform. They didn't mention this. Or they could have even said, we need to amend the 14th Amendment to include the unborn child.
Right.
But there was nothing, not a word about the unborn child. And what it did say, besides the 14th Amendment, and it said that we oppose late-term abortion. That's what the Democrats say. I'd rather them take that out of there, because by saying we oppose late-term abortion, and that's the only so-called pro-life piece of language that's in there, which is not pro-life. That's what the Democrats.
Gayle,
So that is what we
shocked. I'm shocked. Do you have any idea who or why or what is behind this? Do you have any idea?
Well, it was obvious that that those 85 people that voted in favor of this platform that they knew before they came how they were going to vote. So it's the RNC, the people that uh, get involved. It was just people in the states, whether they were non-pro-life people in the states that were trying to get their people elected to the platform committee. I have no way of knowing.
Right.
Utah, where there's, the platform committee is made up of one man and one woman from every state. And of course, John Johnson, Senator John Johnson, who was the man from the state, the two of us, we voted no, we stood and voted no for this platform. We were both very pro-life. We both were doing all that we could. We were both just as in shock. One of the things I did notice, though, they asked at the beginning, how many in this room have served on the platform before? And very few of us raised our hands. And that was kind of unusual.
Huh.
And that seemed to be kind of a thread there, is that they were all new people. And if you were new to the process, you wouldn't really know what was happening.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
like
So,
I'm waiting and waiting for, because I know what's supposed to happen next. And even though they were introduced to the chairman of the committees the night before, they didn't know that they could change their mind by morning. They just said, okay, this looks good. And there wasn't a discussion about that, about, the discussion about the sections of the platform came from the speakers that they had, and they only talked about what they wanted to. In fact, I have to admit that I didn't listen to all of them really closely because I was trying to read the platform and listen to the speakers. I'd seen this section. I'd already read the section on the pro-life section, knowing, oh my gosh, this isn't pro-life, this we can't. So I'm quickly trying to think, how can I amend this? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Still thinking there was going to be breakout committees so we could get to that, wondering who I should talk to, knowing that we had to really work together to get this fixed. So those were the kind of things that are going through my mind. At the same time, trying to listen to all of the speakers. So they didn't really address their idea of addressing the pro-life section was just saying, here it is. Because the other thing that's in there, it talks about the part I read about due process. They talked about the 14th Amendment and the fact that it protects life, but they also talked that we can't that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process. Now, when do we know of a time when unborn babies, were given due process? How does an
absolutely
unborn
never.
baby
No.
get due process? No, it's all about the mother carrying the baby, her due process. And so
Right.
therefore that puts, that part, but that is in the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
But due process, they could have added some extra words. And then the other part, the other section, the other part I mentioned about is about it being the states' rights, that it would go back to the states. And that's even after, it says after 51 years, because of us, that's referring because of the Republicans, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. And so, but it doesn't say, it says of life. I mean, it doesn't say life of the unborn. It
Right.
says
Right.
life.
Gil,
So if
this is very disheartening. I just don't even know what to think. But for a lot of us who this is such an important issue, when we go to the polls, what do we do? It's certainly a worse situation to vote Democrat. But what do we do that the Republican Party has moved away from their strong defense of the unborn? What do we do as voters?
Well, I think what we do as voters is we have to be more involved than just voting. We have to let our Republican elected officials right now know how we feel. We need, because for me, there is something that we can do, because everybody said, well, in 4 years we'll fix this. In 4 years we'll fix this. And one of the things that's been pointed out over and over, as far as President Trump is concerned, is that he did good pro-life things while he was president. And we just have to pray for him and pray that he will do those same things as president this time.
Certainly.
Um, but we still have to have a strong message coming from the Republican Party. First, like you just said, who do we vote for? If we can't trust the Republican Party, who do we vote for? So we've got to fix it within the Republican Party. And one of the ways that that can be done, and this will be the next time that the RNC meets, that's the governing body of the RNC. And so they meet, oh, I think it's either every 3 to 4 months. They will meet again in January, and they pass resolutions there. So one of the things that we can try to do is work within all of our states. Every state has 3 members on their RNC. They have the National Committee man, the National Committee woman, and the chairman of the state party. Those 3 are like in Utah, those 3 that will represent Utah. They'll go to that committee. So if we
Okay.
can start now working with those 3 people and everybody else around us in our state, and then use our influence in other states, because one of the hardest things that's happened through this is some of the strong pro-life organizations that we normally work with and are look to for help for something like this. In fact, they call us for help.
Right.
Uh, they they have accepted this. I'm not going to name names. That's their business. That's their choice. I don't agree with them. They are calling this, they said, we're grateful for this strong pro-life platform. There is, and if it doesn't mention the unborn baby, it's not a strong pro-life platform. And
Certainly.
pro-life in this case is mentioning the 14th Amendment, but not mentioning the unborn babies. That is not pro-life in my mind. Late term abortions. So Mary, how many by the third trimester, how many abortions have happened? What is the percentage that happens by the third trimester?
Very few, Gail, very few. The biggest majority happen within the first trimester, a few in the second, but the third, we're hardly any. And in Utah,
Numbers
of
that I've heard
course,
out there are, numbers I've heard out there are 95 to 98% of all of the abortions have already occurred by
yeah, I'm sure that's correct. I'm
the
sure that's correct.
and
So,
that being
so
the case, that's not pro-life.
right, right. Okay, so for our supporters who want to uh, try to move the needle here, is that meeting open to the public? How do we find out who those 3 people are to contact? What specific marching orders do we have for people?
Okay, no, I don't know how public that meeting is. It's in Washington, DC,
Okay,
and
okay.
there will be 3 representatives from each state in that meeting. But in our state, we can contact those 3 representatives from our state, and we can talk to them. Then we can talk to people in other states and ask them to do the same thing. In your pro-life work, you've met people all over the country, and
Right.
in my case, Eagle Forum is a national organization, and they we're all in agreement that this is not a pro-life platform. Phyllis Schlafly lived and breathed this platform. The language that I just said we need to get in there, was her language.
Right.
So I'm saying, let's keep it simple. Let's just make sure that it says, like I said, the unborn child has a fundamental right to life that cannot be infringed. That's very strong language. And if we don't ask them to restore the whole thing or have a lot of other things, we have a good chance of getting this done. If not at the January meeting, the next meeting.
Now,
And as long as we can get it in.
are those representatives from Utah, the 3 that you talk about, are they selected already, or is that something that will?
Yes, they are. They are all 3 very pro-life. They
Okay.
all 3 were agreeing with all of my concerns. And this is a great thing, it went to the floor to be voted on, the floor the next week of the floor of all of the RNC delegates that were there from all over the platform. But it wasn't just the platform committee now. Now it's all the delegates. Utah sent like 40 delegates. Some states sent a whole lot more, of course. But when those delegates voted on that floor, it was a voice vote. And yes, there's no doubt that more voted yes than voted no, but there were a lot that voted no. And the other thing I saw happen was that there were a lot that voted no, but I looked at people all surrounding me who just didn't vote at all. They were so stunned, they weren't even sure what to do. They're Republicans. Of course, everybody was there supporting Trump. They didn't want to say or do anything that might reflect badly on him. But this is about the RNC, not about Trump.
Right.
And so I looked at people sitting there who just did not vote. Those people who didn't vote were not supporting the platform. So I can, our president of Eagle Forum, pulled that up, the recording of that vote, and I was so pleased to hear how many no votes there were. And we hadn't even had a chance to talk to them. We didn't get a chance. If we could have gotten up there and said, "Hey, here's why we're on the side against this,"
Right.
they didn't even know what hit them. They just all of a sudden there's platform. What
Wow.
they did know, things that they had heard. There were some of us that were out there very, very vocal, doing media, doing everything we could to get the message across the nation of what had happened, because we have these other pro-life organizations saying, "Oh, this is a good platform, it's pro-life." I don't know why they said that. Some of them because they don't, they have access to the White House and they didn't want to change that. Others maybe just didn't understand themselves. I don't know. I'm astounded because those
I'm
very organizations talk to us
I'm
ahead of time and
astounded.
ask us not to do this.
Yeah, I'm
They actually said
astounded,
to us,
Gail.
"This
I
is
am
our
just
bottom line." Yeah.
I'm
So
totally
anyway,
astounded. Thank you so much for being there and being a voice for the unborn, and thanks for everything else you do. Uh, Everybody, our this is not acceptable. Our work is cut out for us. We have got to stand up and be heard. This is not acceptable. Thank you, Gail. I really appreciate you being here today.
happy to do it.